So welcome, Robin, to our conversation on Safepedia podcast about ESG and health and safety. I'm really glad that we're going to be speaking more about how to manage ESG data more efficiently. And we're going to be looking at how can we increase reportability and transparency of our health and safety, environmental safety metrics. So our guest today is Robin Bolton, and he's an executive of ESG principal for IsoMetrix. And for those of you who don't know, IsoMetrix is a leading integrated risk management software developer who provides the most recent ESG and EHS management solutions. So welcome, Robin.
Thank you, Tamara. Good to be here.
Yeah, I'm really great that we're continuing this conversation. That's been a theme for us. It's really a trending topic. And so I thought I'd kick this off by asking you to share a little bit more about ESG, as it is a trending topic these days. And if you could also share with us, what are the benefits of connecting our EHS and ESG initiatives?
Yes, so you're absolutely right. It is a trending topic. Yes, before I go into the sort of the overlap, the similarities between HSE or EHS and then this new ESG terminology, having worked just with IsoMetrix, which started off really in the HSE space and gathered a lot of those metrics and understood those risks, it was quite a natural flow to then get into ESG because a lot of the data is common, and I'll try and touch a little bit on that through our conversation. So yeah, really to start off with, health, safety, environment, HSE has been with organizations for decades. I mean, it was a fundamental sort of business risk that needed to be managed. Your health of the workers, the safety of the workers, environment came a little bit later, but has sort of shot to more prominence. So those systems, those processes, the resources to support those processes have been there. They're well-documented standards in the industry as well that govern those types of practices. So there's been a well-entrenched sort of movement when it comes to managing those HSE risks. Now, those got reported on. I would say that the board of companies or certainly those managers in charge of HSE risks had good sort of visual of what was happening generally. And then ESG is not necessarily new, it's just shot to prominence relatively quickly. And this comes more from, obviously from more an investor's perspective. It's more a sort of evaluation criteria that they will use when screening companies to see if they want to lend to them. But there is certainly an overlap between those two. And the investor is looking for that set of environmental risks, those social aspects and those governance aspects which may materially affect their investment. Now, there are differences. I would say that, the S in HSE is more safety, the S in ESG more broader, being social. It will include aspects of safety and more. There's the aspect, I would say, governance is obviously unique to ESG. So there's overlaps and there's differences. Now, the benefit of sort of tackling both at the same time is important, and I think a necessity. You can't see the two as mutually exclusive. The risks posed by ESG to raising capital and to other risks, be it your own reputation risks, risks from society, and those risks that fall under HSE, in my mind, can be bundled together and need to be sort of addressed together. Maybe I can give you a few examples. Let's just take air quality or emissions. That's probably the primary aspect under the E and ESG in terms of climate change and your greenhouse gases. At the same time, if you look at that from an HSE hat, if your emissions aren't under control, there's the risk of penalties, there's reputational damage. So there's different risks from both directions, but we're addressing the same thing. manage your emissions, make sure you're compliant, reduce your greenhouse gases so that, you're not contributing to the climate crisis, and at the same time, you've got your reputation intact. Maybe similar to the safety of workers under the S. Yes, HSE talks about safety. You want a safe workforce, you want a healthy workforce, you want to engage with your workforce, you want to make sure they're happy, that they don't disrupt your operation. And then I see that as under the ESG, the S there, the social, make sure your workforce is happy, it's engaged with. So those are just some examples how the two actually overlap, and that initiatives must address sort of both those areas.
And if we were to break that out even more, because ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance, right? And even if we were to kind of focus in on the social a bit, there's social as for our workforce. There's also social for stakeholders like customers, suppliers, etc. So it is actually, and it even goes into the community. Right? We've seen a lot of situations in the past where there was a negligence of upkeeping basic health and safety protocols, fundamentals in the workplace. And not only did it impact the workers and the company, but it spilled over to the community. So is that not also part of the social risk that's been discussed?
Absolutely. A lot of these are tied together. I was fortunate, and a lot of my previous work was on mines, on the environmental and social aspects, and I saw many cases of the power of communities. If they were not considered or neglected at the benefit of profit for a company, they had forced to damage your business. So. I suppose you could talk about it out of respect of your workforce means a respect of your community, and if you look after one, the other will be supporting you. So there's certainly many links between those aspects you mentioned.
Yeah, and I think that if we look at companies that excel in their health and in the space of health and safety, such as L'Oreal, that's a good example of a company that has a safe at work, safe at home program. And the reason for that, exactly to what you're saying, Robin, is that they've identified that it goes beyond just their manufacturing sites, right? And so one of the things that I wanted us to also talk about and look at it when we're looking at ESG is the pains that some of the businesses are feeling when it comes to gathering and managing their data. Can you kind of help us understand what have you been seeing and how have you helped those companies problem solve that?
Sure, yes. Yes, there is pain being felt. And I think a big portion of that is because ESG's crept onto us very quickly. There are frameworks and standards that help guide you in terms of understanding what's material and what to report on. But a lot of people are aware that there's a lot of different standards. There's not consistency. There's still a lot of change in that space. So it's very hard to compare metrics, across companies. But, having said that, a business that sort of challenges that I've heard that they're facing is, yes, the bombardment of requests for data, ESG data, different types of data, from many different angles, from if they're a supplier, they're going to have to feed that information up to who they supply to. And if they're a listed company, well, they're going to get requests for this ESG data. So there's many different angles these requests are coming from. So it's this bombardment of requests for data. It's how well structured this data is. It might not even exist yet. And then you find that the data is non-structured, it's in different units, it can't be compared, it can't be consolidated. So it's about that health or the accuracy of that data. Then it's the reporting as well. There's a lot of validation approvals before data information can get released from companies, and there's a lot of steps and gates that have to go through. So, those are just a touching on some of them that we're encountering, and certainly we here at IsoMetrix are trying to address a lot of that by making it a lot more sort of easy to gather, transparency of data, validation of data, the managing of it, and then the reporting. So we certainly identify those as opportunities which we hopefully closing.
Okay, so let's put some rails on this a little bit for our audience who are listening, because when we talk about gathering data or managing data, that is just such a wide black hole for a lot of people. And so some people might be sitting there and going, okay, well, this is really great, but what should I be gathering? So can you maybe, Robin, just share for somebody who's just trying to figure this all out and wants to show their competencies to maybe the C-suite that's already maybe very in tune to this, you know, maybe somebody's in mid-management that's listening right now and they're trying to do some research. So for the EHS professional who's in that kind of career mode, what are you suggesting that maybe they should look at gathering to help out?
Yeah, no, good question. And I think there's a lot of people who will be listening now. And certain of those ESG standards and frameworks are divided by industry. So they give a sense of sort of the materiality or those key metrics and indicators that you should start considering, or you know, as a start, consider these. And they would be very different between industries. You know, the extractive industry would have a different set compared to a manufacturing or food and beverage industry. So there are standards, and those SASB split their indicators by industries and sectors. And so that would be a fair place to start. You know, other aspects that should be considered is the interest of stakeholders. So, you know, what is important to stakeholders? Anyone who has a stake in your business. So it could be, again, we talked about community, it could be suppliers, customers, the government, you know, a whole lot of stakeholders. What would be important for them to be able to see and track?
Now, just you would include employees in that too, right?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
and I'm bringing that up because they've been missed out a lot.
They're a key stakeholder, and their needs need to be considered as well. So it's almost understanding, you know, what is material, or what are the key aspects that I should start gathering to track, and that's. And then the business itself is a stakeholder. So what's important to the business? If I had an operation in a water scarce area, but my industry relied on water, well, that's obviously a key risk, a key indicator that I need to closely track, because that's a business risk as well. So there's a lot of areas you just got to know your business type, the setting of your business as well. So understand those business risks, plus the broader stakeholders, what's of importance or interest to them.
I'm just going to ask a question here to help our audience kind of go through this. Could I be using, say, a SWOT analysis or something to do this kind of work, to do this kind of assessment? What would you be using?
That may help in some aspects in terms of understanding the threats, you know, what might damage my business, and that's something I certainly want to track. But it's actually goes beyond that. It's more the you know, what are those HSE or ESG metrics that are important to my stakeholders, and those that have been published by guidelines and standards and frameworks, because they've done the homework, they've done the research, although this space will still evolve, but they have tried to help by saying, right, you know, for this type of industry, this is key, because we want to know what your risks are, or your impact is. You know, in these sectors, it might be water, it might be air, it might be biodiversity, it might be just general diversity and inclusion. So there's help out there, and certainly there's advising and consulting companies who are pretty good at that first step, just getting you going.
And is that something you can help people with, Robin?
IsoMetrix, we have advisory partners. Okay. So depending on where a company is on their journey, they might be more mature and have, you know, I like to sort of explain it by maturity curve. You know, you get companies who have done this for many years. They're probably they've probably got good software entrenched and maybe on the third or fourth version. compared to another business where this is the first they're hearing of it and there's limited resources, there's limited systems in place. There's quite a spread of where they could be along that curve. Now, IsoMetrix would certainly offer the software platforms to help, but our advisory partners, where we see that need, would come in and just help somebody along that journey.
Okay, so you're suggesting look at ESG standards by industry or sector and what is listed in them. You want to kind of assess what is the interest of your stakeholders. So that's the business, the investors, the community, the management, suppliers, employees. There's quite a list to make sure that you're getting everybody. And you also suggested to look at published lists. So when you're doing your research, look at what is published out there that might help you kind of identify what you need to be gathering. If I summed it up for our audience, okay?
Well done, Tamara. And just on that last point, yes, published information is actually a good point. You look at what your peers and your other sort of businesses that are in your sector are publishing and reporting on, and that'll give you some guidance on, what's probably material for you to also start top measuring.
Okay, great.
Management of change is an important aspect that we've realized as well. And it's probably a theme that we've spoken about. Along comes ESG, it presents a lot of challenges. There needs to be a management of change process, I believe. First, you've got to have the right resources in place, but managers and various people within that organization need to be taken through this journey, explain the changes that are needed so they can get the buy-in. It's quite hard just to rush this in and expect that results will happen and data will flow and reporting will happen without a good management of change process. So that's something I don't think get often talked about, but I think is an important aspect to consider in this ESG journey.
Yeah, I think management of change, that's a good topic, and you're right. It's not something that is often talked about. I actually put it in our notes because, as I said, we are doing a series. So maybe that's something that we could kind of build out on the next episode, because that seems like a very good bridging topic to be doing. Thanks for that, Robin. Now, I wanted to kind of dive into your own experience, your own professional experience. So what have you found has helped to manage data more efficiently and effectively?
A few things. Certainly having the right resources in place is a good starting point. So, software and solutions technology certainly have their place and they bring a lot of advantages. It's not an absolute, but certainly being able to have a central, secure, safe data place where data, wherever it may reside, can then get extracted from and pulled into a central place does help tremendously. It helps in being able to quickly recall data. It helps to be able to analyze that data. You can then do calculations or certain interpretation of that data if it's all in one place. It makes the generation of reports a lot easier. So in my mind, having a central database certainly helps in this process. Now, other little sort of key features that I find useful is also this validation of data. Now, ESG is progressing towards, or let's say the management of ESG data more to how accounting principles and practices work, where data is going to have to be properly managed and secured, and that won't be as easy as just deleting records and replacing it. It's going to have to follow accounting practices and how you're managing that data. And what that means is a central database can certainly help there as well. I was coming back to just the verification, validation of information. Having systems also can help highlight if data does not conform. It might be a manual capture and somebody does it wrong and the system can flag results. And so all these little quality checks can also help your accuracy of data. You can automate data collection processes so that it's timeous. Data comes in timeously. It might be scraping utility bills for your monthly readings or, whatever other stats are needed, that can be automated. So there's a lot of let's say, providers and tools out there that can make this process easier. But it also doesn't take away from what I mentioned earlier. Having the right resources with the right sort of skill sets will definitely help. And lastly, just on the interrogation or the analysis side, it's one thing gathering data and just reporting, but it's another thing being able to interpret and use that data to your advantage. Being able to pick up trends that then you can then address. To me, that's the risk. If you're picking up a trend that's going in the wrong direction, you're able to then put actions in place or strategies and goals to bring that trend to the right direction. So being able to analyze that data, get meaning out of it is, to me, also very important. It's not just about gathering and reporting, it's actually about using that information to your advantage.
No, that's, I think what you're saying, interpreting and using the data is so critical, because so many times we've collected all this data and then it goes nowhere. And that's very frustrating for the people who spend all the time collecting it. So I think, really have your goals about what are you going to be using this data for once you collect it, and how are you going to interpret it so that it has validity. Those are very good points. Now, I wanted to find out from you, maybe if you have some top recommendations or tips that people should be thinking about and considering when they're inputting data.
Yes. So my top tip would be avoid manual capture as far as possible. With digitization, with so much digitized now and information digitally, you got to really just follow that trend and sort of gather it digitally, report on it digitally. So avoid manual capture as far as possible. I mean, I think a lot of people will be able to relate to, as much as you try accurately manually capture, errors creep in. It's just our human nature. And so avoid manual capture as much as possible. Again, I mean, the technology certainly has a place, and there are some great, well-established companies that can offer platforms and softwares that can help you in your specific type of business. I mean, I wouldn't say there's one that fits all types of businesses, and there's many, many new providers on the market, and I think monthly you'll be amazed how many new ones are coming in. My recommendation was do your homework, make sure companies got a track record, because there's lessons they learn along the way. So a track record, well established, and find that sort of specific tool that would work for you. It doesn't need to be elaborate. It could be reasonably simple in its functionality. But consider technology. I think what this process also triggers is the sort of review of a company's data and information. It might, reside in different units and different formats and different consistency. So use the process to try and streamline your information in your business. And I think once that's streamlined, you'll find that managing data and reporting is actually a lot easier and not as challenging as it was before. So I mean, I think those are the hopefully the tips I can share from what I've learned over the last sort of several years working with a software company and being in the ESG space. Just lastly, this as we mentioned earlier, lots happening with ESG. It's got a long way to go. There's going to be changes. There's going to be mergers of standards and new requirements coming through. So it is something that I think will be disruptive for a while. It has been referred to as a sort of a revolution. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely right. It will be disruptive, but I do believe it's the metrics and what should be happening out of ESG should be for the right purpose. It's trying to create more purpose to companies than just profit, and hopefully manage risks that before weren't really considered, and that comes to the environmental, social, and governance kind of risks.
Absolutely. And just for our audience, I wanted to kind of just in a nutshell what those recommendations was: to avoid manual capture of data, right? to do your homework and look at the various tools that are out there and like read reports, read reviews, etc., and find the tool that's right for you and your company. And the third thing was to streamline your business information when you're going through. Did I miss anything?
No, that's right, Tamara. And I'll just say on the streamline, I would say use it as an opportunity to review and sort of your processes, your data, the format of your data, and that should help just streamlining your reporting processes.
Well, Robin, we are coming to the close of our time. I could have gone on with this conversation, but I did want to ask you before we go, was there any thoughts that you wanted to leave our audience with before we go?
Thanks. This has been a great discussion. I think just to leave that, don't be daunted by these new requirements. I think there's a lot of learnings along the way, and there's a lot of help out there. So don't be afraid to call on help. As I said, there's a lot of really good advisory and consulting firms with knowledge. There's some really good tools that can assist. And so just see it as an opportunity to improve your business resilience and your business sustainability. It's there to improve what you do.
Well, thank you, Robin. It's been great to dive into talking more about how we can manage our ESG data more efficiently and effectively to help our businesses grow, as well as, how can we increase the reportability and transparency of our health, environmental, and safety metrics. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Pleasure, Tamara. Thank you.
And just for those of you who might be interested, you can connect with Robin Bolton on LinkedIn, or you can also get his information on the episode page. I'm going to put it there for everybody. And Robin is from IsoMetrix. And just for those of you who don't know, IsoMetrix is a leading integrated risk management software developer who provides the most recent ESG and EHS management solutions. So thank you everybody for joining us and listening. So stay safe.